Yeah, I think the first rock and roll memory was probably Don Kirshner's rock concert, seeing the New York Dolls, and my brother, who was into the Stooges and MC5, and where I grew up in the Bronx, like right on 80 Avenue, there's guys like Handsome Dick Manitoba, so like the Dictators were there, and all these guys were really like music heads. So they searched out bands like the Stooges and MC5, and a lot of not part of the norm kind of rock. But until I moved out of the Bronx, I realized that these bands were just very cultish, very So when I moved from the Bronx to New Jersey, nobody had heard of the Stooges, MC5. But when I think back of the memories, seeing Don Kirshner's rock concert, seeing the Dolls, and loving them, I remember my brother was like, "This is like putting it down." And instantly, when you have a brother, you always compete against your brother. So maybe half of it was like just battling him, loving the New York Dolls, and then to have kind of stamp my own identity. So that's one of the first rock memories. Buying the Dolls records, buying Zeppelin 4, Black Sabbath, Paranoid. Discovering the whole punk rock scene. You remember Corvettes? I remember the department store Corvettes. They used to have this big wall, and I used to go in there on Fridays, and I guess with my parents or something, and I go right to the record department, and I saw all this the Ramones and Richard Hell and the Voidoids and Patti Smith and Television and the Dead Boys, and just just gravitated me to buy. And I think the first one I bought was Leave Home by the Ramones, and at that point I started. That's when I wanted to play guitar. Everybody says it's for somebody different, but really it was for Johnny Ramone. First concert, Led Zeppelin, June '77. I remember, from going to the Garden, because I'd been there to see the Knicks and everything, but everybody's smoking pot, and by the third song and being up all day from playing baseball or something, I passed out after the third song at the Zeppelin concert. I was pretty whacked, and then waking up, towards the end of the set and just being blown away. First band I was in, first band I really did anything was this band called Bad Biscuit. I'd been in a bunch of local bands. But that was something that kind of started as a goof, as a way to do covers to people that, to music that people weren't really hip to. The Dolls and the Dictators and, the Ramones, even Cinderella. That was probably 1989. The weirdest thing is the first band that I ever played with that sounded great as a band was the Ramones, because I auditioned when Dee Dee left and I knew all those Ramones songs. So when I got I talked to Gary Kerr first, their manager, and he says, go to SIR and audition for the Ramones and show up at 7:30. And I'm like, in the morning? And he started laughing. He goes, that was good. And then I was like, really, I was so green, I didn't know better. But that was the first time I ever really played with a band where everybody was in tune, and I knew all those songs, because that's really how I learned how to play bass, by playing, that first Ramones record. You take the balance and you move it to the left, and it's just bass and drums. And by listening to those records over and over again, that's how I learned how to play. So when I got that audition with them, I knew all those songs, and that was the first time I ever played in a band that sounded great. Electric Ballroom started in 1997 from Amy Christie gave me a call, who I had met. She was doing publicity for a band that I was in when we had our record out, and she had moved down to my neck of the woods, and she calls me up and says, "Hey, what?" At that point our record came out and gone wood. It was rainy day, didn't know what the next career move was going to be. And she says, "Hey, I talked to the people over at the Rat, and they may be interested in giving us a radio show." And Rat's a great rock channel, but I wasn't, I didn't want to commit to what I thought it was back selling, front selling music. But she's like, "No, it's our own show. We could play Bowie and Sweet and T-Rex and whatever we want. And between all the people we know, we'll get some great guests." And so they said yes. They were crazy enough to say yes. And within the first 2 months, we had John Paul Jones there. We had Joey Ramone there. We had John Entwistle, and stuff, really blew up. And now that show's been going for over, close to 20 years at this point. Sirius Radio I got the job. Because through the Electric Ballroom, somebody asked if I was interested in doing a punk rock show for satellite radio. And I had no clue what it was. I thought it was an internet channel. I wasn't sure what any of it was all about. But they, we talked finances, and it was worth it for me to go up there once a week. So I went there and met with the people. As soon as I got off the elevator, I felt like I was in the Starship Enterprise. It was incredible. I saw, Meg Griffin and Carol and Pat St. John and all these radio jocks that I grew up listening to, all kind of working up there. And I educated myself pretty quickly, and they've had me do so many different formats there. They hired me doing a punk show called The Punk Yard, and then I was doing an 80s alternative channel, and then I'm currently doing Ozzy's Boneyard and Hair Nation. You know, so I've been doing that. I've been at Sirius since 2002. It's like almost 15 years already. You know, the big thing on the movie, Let Me Down Hard, you know, winning 2 awards, that was great. You know, winning the Garden State Film Festival and the Asbury Music and Film Festival. You know, Billy DeVizia, great director, who I met after a Max's Kansas City reunion show that we played on. And ironically, that this guy lives a quarter of a mile from where I live. And he was telling me about this character of Jack Ainsley. And he said he's been trying to find this Jack Ainsley guy. And he says, you're going to be Jack Ainsley. And I read the script and I'm like thinking this dude's stalking me. Because, you know, I'm not that kind of guy. But, you know, I think everybody, when they see this film, if they or have seen it, know that, you know, there's a little of Jack Ainsley in everybody. You know, there's these choices that we're forced to make sometimes. And, you know, sometimes you make the right and the wrong ones. But, you know, it took 5 years of filming and to see it out there and like people really are reciprocating and loving the movie is really rewarding. And the soundtrack, you know, being the label that I'm on and involved with, Main Man Records, so many great acts are on there. So, you know, it worked out perfectly. The soundtrack was seamless to the film. Frankenstein 3000 started, there was a gig at the Saint with Jesse Malin with D-Generation. And Scott's like, hey, you've been talking for years. And I was really just kind of bullshitting. Oh, I got this band on the side. And he's like, I'm going to give you a gig. And it was like 3 weeks away. I said, you know what, I'll take the gig. And I put some, you know, players together that I work with. And that's how it started. And, you know, that was in probably 1997, 98. And, you know, one thing about our band, which I'm really proud of, is that we've done like 8 or 9 records. And we sell enough records to make a record every year. I mean, around this area, everybody expects them for free. But, you know, we've had quite a good history. And we're very fortunate. You know, we're not household names by any stretch of the imagination, but, you know, we definitely do enough business that we can make records every year, and having that freedom it's a blessing. It really is.